Hi everybody, I am waiting here for Tristan Noon, a composer of TV and film themes. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about his life and how he made the journey from doing that. So I'm just going to be waiting for him to join the chat. Hello to everybody that's coming along. Thank you to anybody who just watched my previous live over on the LSO channel. Obviously today I have got here we go, Tristan. I've got a drink because I'm a little bit thirsty, having just been talking as well. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining me here. And yeah, brilliant, we have Tristan. Hi,
Hi
nice to see
Maxine, how are
you.
you?
Cheers.
Cheers.
We've just established it's just water with lots of nice nice
maybe
things.
maybe it'd be better if it were G&T.
Well, I've got a concert tomorrow morning, so I'm not going to do it like that. But how are you? Nice to
Yeah,
see you.
good.
Are
Yeah,
you in London?
likewise.
Oh,
I'm in Basingstoke, which is about 50 minutes outside of London, slightly more outside of London, so very easy to get into.
yeah,
Uh,
true. Train is very quick. We used to play often at the is it the Hex is it no,
the
what's the
Anvil, the Anvil.
yeah, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean it's easy to get into London. It's very easy to commute. Yeah, and you don't pay
A lot.
insane London prices, which
Yeah,
is
ab-
obviously a bonus. How
absolutely.
about you? I guess you're London based for
I very
all.
central. I actually live in the Barbican, which is obviously where the LSO has its home. So that sort of
Oh,
tells you
okay.
that I'm quite a lazy person. I didn't like commuting into the city with my violin every day, so I thought I'll move closer. So I got as close as I
Yeah,
can get.
you can't get any closer than that.
Well, absolutely. Now I want to ask you. I don't know whether we've ever worked together before. So I know that most of the time you're working probably at Abbey Road or maybe at Air Studios. Obviously, I'm there recording with the orchestra sometimes, but I'm very interested to know your sort of progression to becoming the composer that you are. So did you study an instrument? Did you know what you wanted to do?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's everyone has their own story about how they kind of get going. I mean, really, I would say that my main line of work is more geared toward orchestration and copying than actual composing. But I mean, the way I sort of fell into that was very bizarre because I never set out to go into orchestration. It's just the way it sort of happened. And I'll sort of run you through the way in which that happened. So basically, I was kind of a late bloomer in the music world. I started piano lessons when I was about 13 years old, which I always feel like a complete charlatan because I'm sure people like yourself probably started much younger than that. You know, people start when they're like 4 years old or 6 years old, and
The norm, doesn't it? But there's nothing
exactly.
wrong with that. I mean, in some ways, I think, people, I have a colleague who didn't start the violin till he was 15. And in
Wow.
some ways you have more of the mental grasp of what you're doing. But I think it's harder to mold somebody to an instrument later. That's what I
Yeah.
think is probably more difficult because you're set in your ways if you're a teenager. Whereas as a child, you can kind of like, no, your arm's going to go like this. But I bet your understanding was, better than if you started at 5. But was that a decision you just thought I would like to learn the piano?
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been quite interested in it sounds a bit geeky, but I've always just liked the sound of the piano. When I was in infant school, even, I would purposely sort of sit by the piano in assembly and sort of deafen myself, which is not wise to do. People who are tuning in who are musicians, don't do that. Yeah, and I just love the sound of the piano. And it
Okay.
took me until senior school to sort of pluck up the courage to get lessons.
Right.
Um, so yeah, at first I was getting taught keyboard. They sort of put me onto keyboard lessons, and I've made it clear that I wasn't very keen about doing keyboard because, as you know, there's quite a big difference between a keyboard and a piano.
Yeah.
So that sort of didn't work out, and I was probably about a week from just saying to my parents, look, I think we should stop this because this isn't for me. And then they just so happened to switch me over to another teacher.
Okay.
And she was absolutely fantastic. She was an amazing teacher. And the first thing she asked me, she said, do you want to do keyboard or do you want to do piano? So I was like, wow, yeah, this is brilliant. Can I do piano? So, yeah, it started like that. And then I think it was clear straight away that I was quite keen to sort of learn. I didn't need to be told to practice or anything like that. And I just sort of locked myself away. I guess I missed out on the BMX years that you sort of go out riding with your mates, and you're just indoors practicing. So you do sort of miss out on things like
Yeah,
that with
a
your friends.
sacrifice that
Yeah,
many people in our profession made, I suppose, because there's nothing that quite like honing your craft. And unfortunately, I mean, it's lucky not now, because I would have had too many distractions with social media. The most I would do is
yeah,
probably have a magazine on stand, think, oh, I wish I was out with my friends. But, it's kind of the way it goes, isn't it? When you need to get really good at the piano or any instrument, it does actually require the
that's
hours.
it. Does it really does? If you want to get, I wouldn't say I'm the best piano player, but it certainly helps with my work. But
Mm.
if it's like with anything, isn't it? If you really want to get good at something, there's no shortcuts, is there? It's just it
No,
requires a lot of hours, and
yeah,
um,
been asked many times, how do you get
yeah,
good? What's the secret? And I always say there is an element of luck sometimes involved in
yeah,
opportunities that come your way, which is great. But essentially, unfortunately, there is no shortcut to the hours you have to put in. I mean, it's never what people want to hear. But
yeah. I mean, yeah, you do end up missing out on things, which is obviously just a sad reality of anything when you end up putting hours in. But you're always thinking about where it can lead. I mean, for me, I never really thought about a music career until I was about 15 or 16, when I sort of was really getting going with the whole writing thing. So yeah, I mean, I just took a really keen interest in the instrument, and that's how it started, really.
you
I mean,
started writing even as soon as, like, because if you started learning piano at 13 and you already had an interest in composition at 15.
yeah, I mean, it's so bizarre the way you just sort of fall into these things. I don't really have any recollection of how how I started writing or why I started writing, but I just sort of fell into it, really. So that's how that started, and then I sort of enjoyed uh, orchestral stuff. Listening to. I used to sort of, when I was a kid, I used to play Hook on repeat, the film, and obviously
Oh,
John did the soundtrack. So
underrated.
I guess that sort of filtered into my brain somehow without even realizing when I was young that it was John Williams. And then it just so happened that me and my dad in 2010 went to the Doctor Who proms, which is ironic because we're not even Doctor Who fans. I think I remember just saying to Dad, the music's just really good in this series. Can we go? So that they were having the orchestra on stage with the big screen
Yeah.
at the Royal Albert Hall, and I just came out of there buzzing. I just thought, that's awesome. The orchestra playing with the picture, and I was really excited to kind of do that myself or get involved in that. So I think one thing, without sort of blowing my own trumpet, one thing I was fairly good at when I was young was sort of reaching out to people when I was like 15 or 16, and kind of contacting people and asking for advice
Okay.
about how to sort of get going. I remember seeing I would type in Abbey Road into YouTube and see what videos came up, and I would sort of trawl through those, sort of spend the whole day just going through those and seeing
Yeah.
sort of names that would come up in the video, sort of a making of video. And I remember seeing a making of, I can't remember which Harry Potter film it was. It was one that Nicholas Hooper did the music for. I think it was Order of the
Oh,
Phoenix.
four. I think it might have been
Was
four
it
or five.
4? I think he did 2. I think he did 2. Was it 4 and 5? Or was it
Yeah,
5
something
and...
like that.
Yes,
Yes.
I think it was 4 and 5.
Yeah,
Could be
I
totally
did.
wrong about that, but I really enjoyed that music. And I just remember seeing a guy called Alistair King. I don't know if you know him. He's an orchestrator.
No, I don't know him. I'd probably
And
know him if I saw him. One of those-
yeah, and I saw his name pop up on the screen, and I just thought I should probably email that guy or somehow get in touch. So I got in contact with him on Facebook, and it took him about 3 months to get back to me, as you know, as it does with these people, because they're very busy. And I just remember thinking, oh, he'll probably never have time, or he's seen it and doesn't really want to talk to me. So I sort of just let that one go, and then he just sort of popped up one day, and we got chatting, and you know how these things are. One thing just sort of leads to another. I mean, he said to me, do you fancy coming to a recording session? And John Lunn was doing The Lady Vanishes at Air Studios. So I went there, and that was my first ever studio session. I think that was 2012. So I just sort of sat
That
there.
was was that a
BBC.
BBC adaptation?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
really fantastic. Yeah, it would have been about that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I went to that, and I just remember being blown away by the whole thing, and you know, seeing amazing people like yourself sight reading, and just phenomenal playing that I'd never sort of witnessed before in any sort of, you know, because I'd never been to any sessions or anything like that.
Yeah.
And you know, you just get chatting to people, don't you? And you know, got chatting to a session player called Karenza Peacock, who now
No,
lives in Los Angeles.
yes, that's right.
Yeah, and she's just lovely, and just a phenomenal player. And I just remember being sort of an excitable puppy, I think, and just asking a million questions in the
Oh,
canteen. So, it was funny because I saw her. I went out to LA in 2018, and we met for a drink, and she said, "Oh, I just remember you having so many questions." And I just thought, "Oh God, I was probably bombarding her with a million questions about how everything works."
but it is a fascinating process, the whole idea of everything being put together, and one that people who never really think about it, you have no idea the layers and the work that goes into it, kind of behind the scenes, and how quickly things can suddenly take on an incredible shape. And even I mean, I remember seeing, you know, clients that come in to record, you know, and they're virtually in tears because they never believed something would sound like that, or that, you know, they'd only ever heard it in its electronic form on their computer, and suddenly they hear things played live and things, and it really moves people. But
Yeah.
what made you go from piano to thinking I'd really like to be involved in those kinds of recording processes in the end?
Oh man, I really don't know. I mean, I,
It was just a journey.
yeah, it was just a journey, and I think the whole Doctor Who proms thing was kind of the catalyst for everything. Um, and obviously, just going to more and more sessions after The Lady Vanishes, I then went to a few Downton Abbey sessions,
Mm.
um, and then it was great because at first nobody invited me to the pub. Like John Lunn would say to everyone, right, who wants to go to the pub? And I sort of would have to sort of just disappear.
Oh, I
After a
don't
few times,
really. I've done
after
some of them.
yeah, after a few times, then he sort of invited me, and he said, "Oh, do you fancy coming along?" So it's that sort of thing where if you show your face enough times, you know, people begin to trust you, and you know, your face just sort of gets in there, and people sort of, you know, I kind of hesitate to say recognize, but they sort of they trust you more, because I guess so many people sort of come and go in this
Yeah.
industry, newcomers who sort of try their foot in it and then maybe realize that it's not for them because it's so high pressure, and
Yeah,
it's not for everyone. It's really not for everyone. I can imagine your job is stressful, with sessions and performances, and I have no idea how you do it, to be honest. It's amazing.
we sort of get used to it, but the thing is, we are used to that. If you come to a session and obviously you won't know what the music is. It's not like anyone gets a chance, and you just play it, and that's kind of how it's meant to be. But I imagine being behind the scenes, working to a very, very time pressured environment where things have got to be in the can at a certain point, and certain things might have been held up through no fault of your own. That must be quite tough. But I know exactly what you mean about seeing faces. I mean, you must know Jill then, Jill Street.
Yes. Yeah, she's fantastic. She's the queen of copying.
Yeah, I mean, I chatted to her the other day, and it was amazing because, of course, I'd seen her all the time for about 20 years, and she was just one of the people I always just said hi to. But to be honest, I wasn't even sure what she did. But because she was a constant face at Abbey or Air Studios, and it's just like they're part of the sort of furniture in the end. I mean, when you say you started or you do copy as a copyist, is that the same thing like she would do? You get the bare bones and you have to flesh it out.
Yeah, I mean it's different with copying, I guess. I mean, even orchestration's changed. There's very little fleshing out to do these days, depending on which composer you're working with, because often the way it works, in our industry is that, to anyone who doesn't know this, I guess, you have to produce mock-ups to an incredibly high standard, and the director and the producer, they want to hear everything. You can't just say, at bar 45 the French horns will come in. It's like, no, they want to hear that, and they want to hear exactly how it's going to sound, because the money that goes into this, as you know, is absolutely phenomenal. If you're working on a Hollywood movie, for instance, it's obviously millions, the music budget. So they want to know exactly how it's going to sound.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously,
imagine that's happening, and they're like, no, I want to hear it.
Exactly. I mean, obviously that's how it used to be. John Williams just playing stuff on the piano, but obviously that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, the composers, most of the composers in their own rights are amazing orchestrators themselves, and our job is to sort of translate what goes on in the session, in the door session, into something that's playable by someone like you. Because often there are things that just don't translate well. For example, some things are out of range, or some things don't work at a certain dynamic. So you have to sort of flag these things up, hopefully, before they hit the session, to try and save as much time as possible.
Yeah, quite a few times I remember seeing, you'll get an F sharp off the range of the violin. That's cropped up over the years. So we haven't got that note, actually. So I suppose you're looking for sort of things like that. So
exactly. You're looking for things that basically are going to slow down any session, that are going to cause problems, and you don't want things. I mean, I often write little notes into the part, because I know they're going to flag up questions. For example, if you've got the first and second violins playing a trem, and then you've got maybe even the cello and bass doing trem, and then you've got the violas not. Just saying, a random case where that might happen, everybody would assume, the viola section would assume that that's a mistake, because they're the only ones not playing it. So in those sorts of situations, you might just say, sends the trem in brackets or something. So then that's sort of answered the question before anyone has a chance to flag it up. So it's little things like that. And I know that probably listening, thinking that would just save like 5 seconds, but it's still things like that add up.
Counts. It's so count. There can be so much time pressure, I know, in the session, and sometimes those discussions take ages, because you know, not necessarily as the person who knows right there on the podium. Then it kind of gets passed to another
Yeah.
person by then, you know, and everyone's going, no, well, I think it's Trem. Someone says, no, well, I don't think maybe it's Tune. And then, yeah, 10 minutes have passed, and that's 10 minutes of recording
Yeah.
time that's gone. So no, you do a very very valuable job for us. Are there, and then, so did you actually start working in studios in this way and then sort of go into a compositional aspect, or has it always been quite fluid?
It's always been quite fluid, I would say. I mean, when I sort of going back to the session, the session world, when I would just sort of sit in sessions randomly, it was, I honestly cannot believe how invaluable that experience was, because obviously at that point in your career, there's no pressure on you, because you're just sitting and watching, and you know, you can basically absorb everything that happens, the communication between the composer and the orchestrator and the conductor, the way the conductor communicates with the players. Any problems that come up, you think, oh, okay, right, that happened, and the conductor did this to fix it. And you sort of just pick up, you sort of absorb all these things that can happen in sessions, not necessarily huge problems,
Work
but
experience. It's such great work experience, isn't
yeah,
it? Just to actually visually watch and absorb what people are saying to each other and the way they work.
yeah, and without any pressure as well, because, you know, I would dread to think if I had to sort of go into a session for the first time and I was like the composer or the orchestrator, and you have no idea what's going on, and you're just sort of confused by everything. So, you know, that's a great kind of training period, those maybe 1 or 2 years that you can just sort of hang out in studios and show your face and learn all these things. And then I was at Angel for a Downton Abbey session, and I just remember seeing this tall guy with a big red hat walk into the control room. And I thought, I know that guy. I know that guy from Twitter. He's got this like big kind of fedora. I think it's like a fedora hat. It's a big red hat. And, you know, you just remember things like that about people if, you know, when you see sorts of things like that. So I got chatting to him after the session. I said, I think I know you. Are you Simon Whiteside? And he said, yeah, I am. And then we sort of got chatting, and he, you know, I said, if there's anything I can help you with in the future, just sort of let me know. And at that point, I had gone to Surrey University to study a music degree, and I'd realised pretty quickly that I wasn't enjoying it. I just didn't enjoy the academia.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so much essay writing, and that was just not for me. I thought, well, this isn't really going to help me do what I want to do, so why am I here, sort of thing. And you know, I decided to leave after about 3 months, and then I thought, oh my god, you know, what am I going to do? I mean, I was kind of doing corporate video jobs, kind of composing for production video companies. So that was kind of earning me money, but I wasn't kind of in the TV and film world at that point. And then it just so happened that Simon popped up on Twitter about 6 months later and said, hey, I'm looking for an assistant. Are you up for it? And I was like, yes, definitely.
So.
Well, let me check my calendar. No. So
But that's
yeah.
why sometimes it's just sometimes people meet at the right time.
Yeah.
Just an element of luck of just having made a connection with someone, and then it takes you into some kind of different direction. Because I suppose in music, everything is so fluid in some ways, especially in the industry that you're primarily in. So did that, do you think that was a fortuitous thing to happen to you then?
Oh yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I have no idea where I'd be now without Simon, because he opened so many doors for me, and it was just unbelievable training, because, you know, any job he had, he would say, oh, do you want to, you know, he had a studio in West Hampstead, literally 5 minutes down the road from Abbey Road, and he said, come and help me out on these jobs. I'll sort of train you up, and then that's how I sort of started showing my face in studios.
Yeah.
Because sometimes he'd be too busy, so he'd be like, can you just go to the session and oversee everything? And obviously you're being paid to do it, and you're learning on the job, and it's just like the most perfect apprenticeship ever.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any particular things you've worked on or witnessed that really stick with you, that are really sort of like in a good or a bad way, if you like? I mean, let's face it, not all sessions are very they don't run that smoothly sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest, I think the biggest problem sometimes is lack of communication. Thankfully, there's been no like huge disasters, but like a couple of times there have been times where you think, oh my God, this is a complete nightmare. And you just want it to end, or for a huge hole to swallow you up. But it all ends well. Everything gets done on time. But it just comes down to lack of communication between people. And as you get older and you get more experience, you realise that the communication aspect of everything is so important between the orchestrator and the composer, the orchestrator and the copyist, things like that. And if there is a breakdown in communication, I remember there was an orchestrator that wasn't using our template, mine and Simon's template. I was working on this job, and he was sending over these Sibelius files, the orchestrator, to us, and they were just. I don't know if you know much about Sibelius, but you can very easily. I've got to be careful how I word this, but you can very easily mess things up if you kind of don't know what you're doing.
Explain to people that's a music program that I would say the majority of composers would use on a computer, right?
Yeah, so it's a notation file.
This is probably the most famous one.
Yeah, and if you sort of don't know what you're doing, you can easily, I don't know, do just weird stuff. So it was kind of, time was running out, as it always does on these jobs. And we were saying, right, we've created this template. Can you orchestrate into this? Because that means by the time it gets back to us, we've set everything out the way we need to, title pages and bar numbers on every bar and all that sort of thing. And for some reason, they just weren't responding and refused to use it. And obviously that makes the job like five times as long, because there were so many weird things going on in the Sibelius file. And it's just weird. It's just things like that it's a friendly reminder that it's just so important to communicate. So that's always stuck in my head. Yeah, I think that's the key.
And you have to, I guess, in a session as well, you guys have to think very quickly on your feet for changes and things like that, because things do end up sort of just, if it's not something, a director liked the sound of, or once you're actually really hearing it. I know for sure that we've had stuff where they're like, oh, can we just wait a few minutes and then quickly print something else off?
Oh,
So I imagine in that sense, people, like you would be really rushing about. We're also like,
yeah. I mean,
race back with photocopied warm sheets.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked on jobs where I was actually helping out on the Downton Abbey movie and doing some copying, and something needed changing in the orchestration. I think they just wanted the oboe part to be copy and pasted into the bassoon part. So it was just a mad rush. It's a very simple thing to do, but it's that feeling of knowing that there's an orchestra waiting out there. And every second going by, it's like, oh, that's like a grand. So another grand. You're praying that the printer doesn't fail, or you run out of toner, or something horrible happens like that. So, and then you're sort of running out, sprinting out, and getting it on the stand, and then everything's fine. But it's just those sorts of situations where you can be sat there for 9 hours, and then suddenly you just got to sprint into action for just 2 minutes.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
it's those 2 minutes where you're really earning your money because, you know, I don't know. I mean, some people maybe can't handle the pressure of this sort of job. Like, I guess in your line of work, you can't just, if you were turning up to a session, and I'm sure there have been times where you've thought, wow, this music is really difficult, but you can't just sort of
You can't go home
you
then.
can't just say, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I'm just going to go away and
I
get a
know.
coffee. So you have to sort of work your way around the problems, don't you?
Yeah. There's just a way.
Everyone's working together to try and help each other, aren't they? That's what's great about a music team, is everyone's working together to
Yeah,
try and
result. Everyone wants a really, really good positive result, and
yeah,
everybody knows that this big group of people, whether it's the orchestra plus all the team in the in the recording booths, have to sort of be on the same kind of page. But and I was wondering, when you talked about having to change music stuff, sometimes we think, often violin music, like the first and second violins, often will have the set all our parts. It'll just
yeah,
say violin,
yeah.
and then you end up with loads of sheets, and people are like, "Oh no, we don't like that." Is it because often you think you might ask each section to play to double up or something, and it saves time?
Yeah. So that's all to do with balance. I mean, it's all to do with having more players, maybe like you say, more players on one line, or if you've
Yeah.
got more complex divises, you might want to change the balance of how many players are on specific notes. But you're right, it creates an awful lot of page turns, dodgy page turns, and
Yeah. Well,
you
I've
know,
had many problems with that, where suddenly it's all like fallen in like a fan shape, and you're just holding on to it, and the red light's on, and you're like, no. But it does save a lot of time in comparison to if the conductor composer ever has to dictate something new. That takes ages, because for a start, there's no extra staves, so you
no,
having to do 5 wonky lines, and by the time everybody's kind of got a handle of what we have to write in, it might as well have probably been printed
that's
out by
yeah, well that's
yourself.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? That's why everything has to be so perfect, because, like you say, the dictation just can take so long,
Mm.
and it wastes so much time. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting about the change of balance with violins and things like that, and I guess people don't really know, but in the session scoring world, we rarely ever play things through all together. It's sort of broken up into chunks. So you sort of do, depending on the complexity of the music, of course, you wouldn't do that if it was just, footballs on the page for
Yeah.
2 minutes. If it's kind of a really complex cue, generally, like as an orchestrator, what I do is I go through and put double bar lines in wherever I think we can sort of stop and start, which makes it really handy for the conductor to say, right, let's go from bar 12 to bar 42 and get that chunk,
Yeah.
and then get 43 to whatever. And it just really helps with the players, because there are sometimes, if you're going from like a tremolo to a motor rhythm or vice versa, it can be quite difficult sometimes, I guess. So there are things that you're maybe looking out for when you're orchestrating, to think, right, that there is going to cause a problem.
Yeah.
Let's
It's almost
let's
an edit. It's, yeah, we're thinking of it as an edit point.
exactly, a
Yeah.
clean break.
Clean start.
So it's all those things you're kind of thinking about when you're working as an orchestrator. I mean, I generally, when I'm working as an orchestrator, then generally do the copying myself, just because it's a lot easier to look at it kind of horizontally rather than vertically when you're looking in. If you're looking at Sibelius at the full score, you're trying to think of the way the chords work together and the dynamics, and sometimes it's very easy to leave a dynamic out, like a starting entry in like a viola part or something, and as you're sort of flicking through the parts, you can go, oh, I've accidentally missed that out.
Yes.
So it's useful, like as an orchestrator, to do your own copying, for those reasons, really. And there are things that you might spot that the copyist might, because obviously, because you've done the orchestrations, you sort of know the tracks inside out.
yes, you're going to be more aware of your own.
Exactly. You're sort of casting your eye over it, and you're like, oh, well, maybe that doesn't look right, or something like that. So you can flick to the full score and think, that maybe that is missing. And it's just little things like that that save time. I'm sure, as you know from your own work, it's the small things generally that as we spoke about earlier, that cause the biggest hold-ups.
Yeah, it can be. Sometimes you'll just find that a whole discussion sort of kicks off over something which,
Yeah.
really probably shouldn't have. And, you can end up spending a hell of a lot of time over stuff that may not in the end take on a lot of significance, to be honest. But these things are always, someone's paying for this to be recorded, and therefore one has to check every kind of minute detail in case, I think. I think anyway. But
Yeah.
what sort of so when you're the composer though, I guess, do you feel very differently about the music? Because obviously at this point now it's like your creation.
Yeah, I mean, generally my work as a composer has been more in the box than it has been when I've been doing orchestration, but there have been a couple of times when it's been recorded live. And I guess because I've done the sort of orchestration aspect of it, I sort of know I'm less sort of nervous. Whereas if you're a composer, and especially if you're a composer that can't read music, you're probably if you're kind of a new composer, you're probably a bit nervous about what to expect from the orchestrator. Because if you can't read music, there's no way of really checking. I mean, what I do is I bounce out the Sibelius export, and I have to make it really clear to the composer: look, just try and listen to the notes, and don't listen to anything else, because everything that you hear is really going to be a huge shock to your ears after you spent 2 days getting this mock-up right, and then you hear this dreadful export from Sibelius, where the dynamics make zero sense. I remember before Note Performer came along, which is kind of an engine that makes the sounds sound more realistic. The general stock Sibelius sounds, the harmonics wouldn't come out at pitch. So, yeah. So if you had like an artificial harmonic with a perfect fourth, suddenly you'd have like the fourth playing as well over the top.
Oh, that's horrible. Oh, that's, yeah, okay.
So it's like, hold on, I didn't write that note. It's like, no, calm down, it's fine. It's not how it's actually going to sound during the session.
No wonder so many people get so moved when they actually hear a live orchestra playing their music, because probably all they've heard is this. I mean, and at times when I've heard, something that's gone through the computer, and it's all a bit metallic and it's very sort of soulless, I suppose. I mean, obviously it's come on in leaps and bounds in the last certainly 20 years that I've been doing sessions, but it's still not the same as having living, breathing, musicians, I guess, playing in places. So what's the atmosphere like usually in the booth? Are there times where it's quite tense and other times where it's quite a nice, relaxed time?
Yeah, I mean, it varies on every job. I've spoken about this before, and you sort of have to read the room, the people that you're working with. Some people are up for a bit of a laugh and a joke before the session starts, and some people just want to get their head down. And you sort of have to know that balance of what, it's a lot of this job is about people skills and just working out how to sort of play it, because for some people, the sort of laughy, jokey before the session atmosphere calms everyone down. And I know it does for me personally. Yeah. But then sometimes it's just, it's all a bit, maybe not sterile, but it's just a different working
I suppose people, they're sort of, they've kind of put a hell of a lot of money into it, and they're just focused from the moment they just arrive.
Yeah, completely. So you just sort of have to work out what that is, and you get an idea straight away of the way people work, especially if you're working with people, multiple times. But generally, so many sessions have been relaxed when you wouldn't think they would be. I remember I did a session for Motorsport Heroes, and it was a documentary, and I had about 4 days to orchestrate, do the copying, and do all the printing and collating and stuff. It was mental, and I was really worried about it, actually. You know, a lot of late nights and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, turning up to the session was quite anxiety inducing, just thinking, oh my God, you know, it's you know, that first cue, it's like, I hope all the notes are in the right place, and I hope the composer's happy. And it was one of the best sessions I've ever been to. It was so calm. The players were amazing as usual. And it's just things like that where it's like, wow, you know, sometimes when you're under the most intense pressure, it somehow works out. So, you know, there's that running joke, isn't there? If you give someone a year to write a piece of music, they'll do it. They'll do it in a year. If you give them 2 days, they'll do it in 2 days.
Days anyway, yeah.
So, you know, I think people who are kind of working in this industry are used to working around the clock when the pressure starts mounting. And, you know, we always knew that that was going to be a stressful job to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, it turned out really, really smoothly. So I'm just glad. I'm glad.
What are some of the sort of proudest things you've been involved with, do you think?
Well, I was involved in the Gary Newman's tour, his UK tour, and they had an orchestra. You know, it seems to be very popular at the moment. An orchestra playing with the band on stage, and they did you know, several venues around the UK, including the Royal Albert Hall, and I think was it the Albert Hall in Manchester? Oh no, what's the other one in Manchester? What's the other?
Not Bridgewater Hall. That's the concert.
That's it. Yes.
Hall.
Yeah, Bridgewater Hall. And that was just a stunning show to be a part of. Because one, you're working with somebody who is just, you know, he's so modest. He doesn't realise how much of a genius he is, and you know, how he sort of pioneered synth pop music, and such a down to earth guy. And that, I thought that turned out really well. Obviously, now it's just the whole live industry is completely decimated, and I don't know what your thoughts are, and how your friends are doing in the concert world in particular.
It's been very tough, actually, because I think, having spoken to, you know, people in your sort of section of the industry, like Jill, and I don't know if you know Fiona, they've kind of carried on. They've had projects to do, stuff that's kind of gone into lockdown, like post-production of finishing, you know, music and stuff. Whereas obviously for performing musicians, everything just sort of fell away. You know, the moment they sort of say, don't come in to tomorrow's rehearsal, it's like, okay. Yeah. And also, nobody, you know, sessions have now obviously restarted in the last, I guess 2 or 3 weeks. And it's an interesting process to see, isn't it? Because suddenly, you know, no longer are we all piling in into into, say, Studio One with, you know, maximum, sometimes we would have 80 people in there. So now to see it all distanced, you know, maybe strings only, very sort of far apart. It's going to be very interesting to see how it, you know, I think it will, people manage. We all sort of adapt and manage, but certainly live performance, that's for sure. I do really miss that. Although I'm always been really fascinated by the whole recording processes and what goes on in the studio, from probably the first time that I went in, you know, and did, you know, recordings with the LSO, and you sort of think, oh, brilliant, it's a film. And I think the first one I did, we recorded at Watford Town Hall, huge space. Wow. And it was Elliot Goldenthal music. Okay. I think the film was fine. It was called Final Fantasy. So it was something to do with Final Fantasy. This is going back 20 years. And I remember thinking, oh, so interesting. We're going to play through this film music. And obviously it's suddenly tiny, you know, minutes, you know, 2-3 minutes at a time, and not in order, and not remotely in any form of order that you understand, and even more hilarious when you can actually see the film and it's totally you're trying to work out what's happening because it's not running from minute 1 to minute
No.
90, just jumping all over the place. So I've always been really interested in the whole process of how it works and all the people that need to kind of, in a way, our job is simple. We just turn up and someone has put, just puts this music on the stand and you're just like, right, red lights on, headset. Here we go. It's, I think more of the stress really kind of comes from the behind the scenes and all the stuff that you do, leading up to it. So you think that going to see that Doctor Who prom really sort of cemented this idea of wanting to do what you do now?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, it's that buzz, isn't it, of kind of hearing an orchestra, and I think particularly seeing it against the footage was really important to see how composers are able to manipulate people, aren't they, with the music? They can, it's very powerful that what they can do to make you feel a certain way at a certain time.
Yeah,
there's very little going on screen, and then the music can sort of coerce you into
the way of
feeling
thinking
a certain way. Yeah. So
I remember seeing something on TV once, and they showed footage of a spider. It was like a tarantula walking across the screen, and they played some very ominous music, and you just felt this chill. And then the next time they did it, they played like this really sort of jokey, and it made you feel totally different. And it is amazing how the music that's put onto, say, images changes things. And to the point, to be honest, a lot of people don't. I was only so aware of it one time when I saw this, I don't know why, I went to see a foreign film when I was in New York on tour once. And at the end, we said, there was no music in that film. And we realized there was actually zero music used. So it felt empty. I mean, it was a very powerful film in a way, but because there was, and you only really, at the end when the sort of credits ran, you thought, yes, all very, very sort of quiet and silent, but we're so used to having music in, amazing, even with Netflix now, because obviously things have become so huge for that platform, proper sort of series and films, and having incredible music on top of it. And even in computer games, to have full-on symphony orchestra and symphonic scores for computer games is, where do you think it's going next? Is it just, it's sort of an infinite kind of progression?
Yeah. I have no idea. I know that video games are particularly popular, and that whole virtual reality thing is really kicking off right now. I orchestrated and did the copying for Doctor Who: The Edge of Time, which is a new virtual reality game that came out a few months ago, and that's quite interesting. Being able to sort of get in this world and put on this, I guess it's Oculus Rift or something, and that is going to be so much more popular, I think, in the near future as that just really takes off, and it'll be interesting to see how that sort of changes the landscape. But sort of going back to how music makes you feel, I don't know if you've seen that YouTube video where they play the throne room, the scene in the throne room from Star Wars, and the music is
with no music.
And it just feels so awkward. It feels so unbelievably awkward.
It is so weird, like the faces they all pull, and there's
just
just
the shuffling around like in the room.
It makes you think, gosh, when they're actually filming this, they must feel very bizarre sometimes without all of it on top. Because I mean, it must happen in sessions you've been, but we've had countless actors come and listen in on sessions, and they're always really excited about it because, of course, they're hearing it for the first time. They're hearing the sort of the product, which they had no concept of what was going to be in the background when they're shooting some very
Yeah.
emotional scene, and then suddenly, because music ends up pretty much being the last thing, so they find it very, you know, and I think, gosh, yes, how bad. Of course, they're filming this just as is without this incredible, you know, so the soundtracks have just become such important things for us, and they just enhance, I think, film and TV so much. I have to say, when you mentioned Hook earlier, I don't know if you, I think if you take the Metropolitan line in London, have you noticed when the doors open, it's a little tune from that soundtrack, like da 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 da. The tune is like da 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 when they're flying. And the Met line, I think it's the Met line. It's one of the city lines anyway, and it goes da da da, and I always think of that film. It's funny what little sort of refrains take you.
That's amazing.
Different places. I was like, is this a John Williams fan? Whoever's
That's fantastic. No, I can honestly say I've never noticed that, but I'll be listening out for it now.
I just want to tell people that we've got 10 minutes. So if you've got a question, do pop it in the comments for Tristan. So we can, you know, if you've got any question about, I don't know, his composing, his copying, the recording processes and things. What's that? Yes, it is the Met line. Jill, Jill says it is the Met line. I thought I was going mad. It does make me laugh every time I hear it. But I just think Hook is a bit underrated in that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily. I've only played it in concert actually, I think once or twice, and people are like, "Oh, this is beautiful," but you know, and I love the film anyway, so I just think his music is just incredible.
I mean,
but no, go ahead.
I was going to say you're so fortunate. I mean, it's to play these amazing bits of music. I mean, it's funny actually because I've seen you perform for years now. So I've kind of known you from. It sounds a bit weird, but from afar in the audience and just seeing all these amazing players. And it's just amazing to, you know, I really hope these concerts get back up and running because you can just sort of go to these concerts and just forget about normal life, and it takes you away. I remember, I don't know if you were playing on this particular one. Did you play on the Desplat one?
Probably.
When he was doing, he did
Harry,
kind of, yeah, he did kind of a compilation of things, and he was, I think, was he conducting? No, I don't think he was conducting himself.
you mean it was a concert of film music that we did on stage?
I'm pretty sure it was at the Barbican. Yeah.
It was all music that we had recorded for film.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing hearing all those.
Yeah,
and to be actually, I would say, hear it properly in real life rather than just, you know, on Spotify or something.
Yeah.
And it sort of goes back to that the difference between sort of doing things as a concert recording and doing it in a session recording, because I heard a rumor that the How to Train Your Dragon scores, because it was all stemmed out into sort of brass winds and percussion, all that sort of stuff, the balance actually is terrible if you were to kind of play it all together, because obviously with the benefit of just having just brass playing or just strings at any one time is that you can you know, you can sort of blast the brass and not worry. You can sort of turn it down, as it were, in the mix.
There is the advantage. Yeah, we do often stem stuff just to get a good mix. Someone says here, Jeff says, I heard Tristan say he was an orchestrator. Who are your favourite orchestrators these days and from the past?
I have to say, Jeff Atmajan, and I hope I'm getting his name right. I heard James Newton Howard say his name like that, so I assume that's the way he says his name. But he is just phenomenal. I mean, you know, you look through any score by him, and you just see what he's doing, maybe with the divisi and the strings, things that I was looking through the score for Signs the other day, and there was something that he was doing between the viola and the cello that I never really would have thought to do myself. And you can just pick up so many tips and tricks from orchestrators like that. Alistair King, he's obviously another great orchestrator, really in demand. Works with Harry and Rupert Gregson-Williams and John Lunn, and you know, all the sort of big TV and film.
You've got a fan here who says, "Hiya Tristan, he's the best. So fantastic to work with. I can't recommend him enough." That comes from Jan Hoglund.
Oh, Jan. Oh.
I was really worried about reading that. not getting this.
No, Jan's a good friend of mine. He's a fantastic guy. He runs a sample library company called Audio Imperia. They do great sounding samples. So yeah, go out and buy the samples, everyone.
This is a double sort of shout out. No, I think yeah, let's hope that, you know, obviously recording is steadily getting back into the studio, and fingers crossed, you know, music back into halls. I do love those concerts where, I mean, we did a couple of years ago, you know, Star Wars: A New Hope in the Albert Hall with live orchestra to
Wow.
the film. And being a big Star Wars fan, this wasn't a problem for me. I think we did 5 performances in 2 days or something.
Wow.
So it was quite a long, and some people had never seen the film in the orchestra. But I think there's something about bringing all that sort of thing together, which makes people very aware then of the soundtracks. I mean, obviously John Williams needs no introduction, but often, you know, you hear such beautiful, you know, soundtracks that you think, gosh, I would love to just hear that on stage, and not even just sort of within the context of you know, the actual film or TV program it's in. But it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for giving up your time.
No, thank you.
You know, sharing all the experiences and stuff. Hopefully, have you got any last words of advice for anyone who would like to go into in this kind of profession?
I think be easy to work with is one of the most important things in this sort of job, because as you know, this job is already stressful enough as it is, and nobody wants to work with somebody who is going to make you more stressed out. So I think being easy to work with, and you know, being a nice person can get you a very long way, because you know, if people enjoy working with you, and that's one of those important things there is. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're super arrogant or you think you know it all, that just doesn't make for a very good working relationship. So I think being easy to work with is important. And also, you know, you should always be learning. You never, you know, you could study music every day, every waking second, from when you know, from birth till up until you die, and I still don't think anyone would know all there is to know. You know, have this sort of attitude where you always want to be learning, and I think people always want to work with people like that. So I would say that's my advice.
Great advice. So be a nice, pleasant person to work with for sure, and don't forget that you're always learning. Thank you so much. I hope to see you in a recording studio soon. So if we find the, you know, glass, we'll give each other. But whatever you do, stay safe, and thanks so much for all your interesting stories and things. Take care.
Thanks so much, Maxine. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.